Sometimes books get better with time, and sometimes they don't. Hi friends, my name is Liza, and welcome to my book club. Today I am going to be talking about 4 popular BookTok books that I actually changed my rating on after I reviewed them. You know that feeling when you finish a good book, you're all hyped up, emotions are running high, endorphins are pumping, and you rate it 4 or 5 stars on Goodreads immediately? Then after a little time and thought, it wasn't as good as you thought it was? Yeah, that's what happened with these 4 books. Turns out my past self had some questionable taste when she reviewed these books. Now I'm thinking clearly, the dust has settled, and I'm ready to yap. Now I want to preface this by saying, yes, I did enjoy them when I read them. Yes, I am changing my review now. Yes, it is embarrassing. And I've thought a little bit more critically about the problems I found in these books and the things that I didn't enjoy. Retroactively, I did not enjoy them as much as I thought. I had kind of just convinced myself that I did like them. I obviously really loved these books when I first read them, so if you still love them, I love that for you. This is just my opinion. First on my list is Slinger by Rachel Scheider. I actually have a review of this book on my YouTube channel right now where you can go back and see how much I love this book when I first read it. But now that a few weeks have gone by, I've had time to think about the things that I didn't like in this book. And honestly, there were kind of a lot. First, the world building in this book stopped at the 30% mark. After 4 or maybe 5 chapters of this book, the world building completely stopped. At the very end of the book, we are still being introduced to kingdoms and people and political relations that have major plot impact, but there was absolutely no mention of them for the first 200, 300 pages of the book. The romance between Bryn and Acker was so mid, like there was no chemistry between them at all. They went from hating each other to tolerating each other to like immediately professing their love for one another. It just didn't really make any sense. I honestly thought that she was going to end up with Messer for like 60% of the book. The way that she was interacting with Messer was the way that she should have been interacting and thinking and valuing Acker, because he's the male main character. She's supposed to be in love with him. And honestly, she fucking hates his guts. Like, what the heck? But she's supposed to be in love with him. I did like Acker as a character, but Bryn not so much. And please do not get me started on the plot twist at the end of this book. I don't even know what to say about that, honestly. Like, the plot twist was so contrived and poorly executed that it honestly ruined the rest of the book for me. Like, I was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt because honestly, the vibes were pretty good. I was willing to look past a lot of the issues with the book up until the plot twist at the very end. It did not make any sense. They were going against things that had been previously established as like vital components of characters' morality. A good plot twist has things leading up to it where it happens and then you're like, oh my God, that's what all of that meant. That's what the author was trying to tell us. Like red herrings, foreshadowing, things like that. But that did not happen in Slinger. There was nothing that really led us to believe that the characters involved in this plot twist would be doing that, especially the secondary characters. Like, it didn't make any sense for them at all. I sometimes found myself reading conversations or interactions between 2 characters, and I felt like I had like skipped an entire chapter. The author really did not take the time to build the justification or the reasoning for characters to do what they do in the end. It just kind of feels like it just happened. And I'm not saying like in an unreliable narrator kind of way, but in like I had this idea when I was almost finished with the book, so I just kind of threw it in and didn't go back to flush things out kind of way. For those reasons, I did lower my rating. Initially, I rated Slinger 4 stars, and I'm going to lower it to 3. Honestly, it's kind of more like 2.5, but we're going to settle with 3. Next on my list of books that I lowered my rating for, and y'all do not come for me for this, Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Listen, I was a Powerless hater when I first read the book, but I was kind of scared to say my true thoughts and how I felt about it at the time because it was so popular that I was like worried that people were going to be like mean to me. But now I really don't care, and I think enough time has settled. I initially rated Powerless 3 stars, and honestly, I'm going to lower it to 2, maybe even 1.5. This is so clearly AU fanfiction of Red Queen. I really think Lauren read Red Queen and she was like, wow, this is a great idea. Why don't I write my own? And she did. It's like Red Queen and Hunger Games kind of put in a blender, and that would be Powerless. The relationship between our two main characters is honestly kind of obnoxious. Like if you took out the banter between the two main characters, I don't think we would have a book. Like, I don't think that there is a lot of substance to this book, especially if you take out the things that were obviously pulled from other popular, successful novels. And the banter, I don't think we would have anything. Like, I think that is what this book is built on. I know that this was Lauren's first book, so I don't want to be too critical of her writing, but it was full of typos. And I know it was indie published and, Lauren probably didn't have a lot of resources to do things to the extent as a traditional publisher might. I do think that we should hold our reads and our books to a standard, and I think checking and editing your book for typos is definitely the bare minimum. Unfortunately, I received a copy that did have a lot of typos in it, misspellings, syntactical errors, and that really takes me out of it when I read. I also think that this book had a lot of contradictions built into the world, with Peyton's powers and Kai's ability to sense powers, but she doesn't have any powers, but he's not going to sense it. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, he can sense that she doesn't have any powers. She doesn't have any powers. How is that not mentioned more than a couple times in the book? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I do think that the ending of this book was pretty good, but honestly, I don't think it was enough to save it, in my opinion. I didn't pick up the secondary book. I think it's called Reckless. I didn't read that because I just did not enjoy Powerless at all. I thought it was very bland and so clearly pulled from other pieces of work that have already been done that it just kind of really didn't do it for me. Next is going to be both of the books in the Court of Ravens duology by Liv Zander. The first book is Feathers So Vicious, and the second book is Shadows So Cruel. This is a dark fantasy romance that I initially rated 4 stars, and I'm lowering it to 2. Maybe even 1. When I was reading the first book in this series, I felt truly uncomfortable with how the author was portraying the relationship between the female main character and one of the male main characters. It says in the beginning of the book that there is no NC between the main characters. That's a lie. It does happen. I am not here to say whether or not dark romance or taboo romances should be put out or they are wrong. I'm not saying that at all. I like dark romances, but I do feel like Feathers So Vicious kind of took it to the next level, and it did make me a little uncomfortable when I was reading it. Again, this is just my personal opinion and my personal experience with the book. If you loved it, I love that for you. I feel like when I was reading it, I was trying to make excuses for continuing reading the series because I did like aspects of the book. I liked the universe. I liked the fact that they were raven shifters. That felt so unique, so cool, so different. I did like one of the male main characters, Sabian. One of the male main characters is absolutely a piece of shit, and he has no redeemable qualities whatsoever. It infuriates me that it is a romance, so they did end up together in a happily ever after. But I do feel like it was a little too glorified on the NC aspect for me personally. I feel like I kind of got caught up in the potential of the world. I just think that this book was a little too dark for me personally. I rated it 4 stars because I did skip a lot of the interactions between the main characters that were in C. I just don't think that it was for me. Looking back on it now, I wish I had just DNF'd it, honestly, because if you have to skip 40% of the book, you don't like that book. And I think that's something that I need to really stick with in the future. Like, there's no reason to finish a book if you don't enjoy most of the content in it. And that's kind of how I feel about this duology. I think that it's too dark for me. And I do think that I do like romances that have the male main character be a little bit redeemable, even like even a tiny bit. And he was not. So yeah, this one was a rough one. I would definitely rate this one, I think, 1 star. Last on my list today is When the Moon Hatched by Sarah Parker. This one was hard. This one was a rough one. I actually had no intention of lowering my rating for When the Moon Hatched until I had a conversation with one of my bookish friends where I was just like making excuses. She was like, oh, this was wrong with the book. And I was like, yeah, but... And she was like, what about this? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's kind of true. Like, that did happen. Like, that was kind of annoying. I started to reread When the Moon Hatched and I realized that I didn't like it as much as I thought I did. I think you guys know exactly what I'm going to say with this one. It is so incredibly purple. Could not get through another read of it after I kind of acknowledged the fact that maybe it wasn't as good as I had hoped and thought it was. So purple prose is basically when people are so like lyrical or loquacious that it's like pretentious. And I think that is definitely When the Moon Hatched. I definitely think that it is purple and a little pretentious. When the Moon Hatched has such a colorful, beautiful, unique potential world. And I just think that Sarah Parker did not meet the expectations that I had in my head. Like, my imagination was going wild. The story I had in my little noggin, amazing. And I was like mad that Sarah Parker was like interrupting the movie that was playing in my head. There was very little, honestly, no characterization or growth within the female main character from the beginning of the book to the end. If we're looking at the size of this book, for there to be no character growth for anyone is kind of crazy. There is so much that happens, but also so little. I understand it's because we're kind of like jumping back and forth, but like, I don't know. After nearly 700 pages, there's not any character growth. I don't know. That's kind of hard to justify. The dragons in this world are so vital to literally everything, and yet they are like glorified Ubers. The dragons were there, but only when it needed to push the plot along. And that was kind of frustrating. There was not a lot of involvement with the dragons in this universe unless it needed to push the plot along for some reason, and then they immediately just disappeared again. This is probably the hardest one for me to swallow because When the Moon Hatched was 5 stars for me when I read it. Like, I loved everything about it. But honestly, looking back on it now with the rose-tinted glasses off, I'm lowering my rating from 5 stars to 3.5. So these are 4 popular BookTok books that I lowered my rating on after I reviewed them. The 3 books I have in my hand right now, Powerless, Slinger, and When the Moon Hatched, were all initially indie published and then picked up by traditional publishers due to their popularity online. I really hope now that the authors have the resources from traditional publishing houses like developmental editors, copy editors, beta readers. I'm really optimistic that the sequels and the rest of these series are going to be fantastic. They're going to be amazing. I think that the authors are very talented. They just needed to spend just a little bit more time with editors and beta readers, in my opinion. Have you guys ever lowered your rating or like changed your rating after you've sat with your thoughts for a little bit? If you have, please let me know what book it was and why in the comments below. And also if you guys have read any of these books and what your ratings were for them. That is all for today. Until next time, my name is Liza. Be good, be safe. Bye.